Hey everyone, it's CinneCine here, and welcome to another episode of CinneCine Goes SyFy, where we're going to do another deep dive into a science fiction classic. Now, I got something a little different for you tonight. This is not the biggest film I could think of, and some people here may not even know it, but this is really a cool, smart script. And you know how I am about those scripts. So it is written by someone that we all know and love, and I'll get into that a little bit later of who it is. But the film is Time After Time from 1979. And here is just a little taste of what it's about.
The time is 1893, and novelist and inventor H.G. Wells makes a startling announcement.
Gentlemen, I am talking about traveling through time in a machine constructed for that very purpose.
The first to use the machine, however, is Dr. John Leslie Stevenson, better known to history as Jack the Ripper. And what was to be a voyage of discovery, in an instant becomes a manhunt through time, from 19th century England to 20th century San Francisco.
May I come in?
Certainly, certainly. You were literally the last person on earth I expected to see. You've given me quite a turn.
I'm obliged to take you back to face the consequences of your acts.
Take me back. How do you propose to do that? By force?
Be reasonable, John. We don't belong here.
A 19th century gentleman.
Are you quite certain I'm not forcing you to do anything that you'll regret?
Forcing me?
And a 20th century woman.
My God, Herbert, I'm practically raping you.
Yeah, that's true.
Join forces to capture a criminal from the past, at large, in the modern world. But even more than they want him, he needs them.
You throw me the key, and I'll release the girl.
On your honor, John.
You have my word as a gentleman. Now, there's just one thing. I would have expected that you'd notice by now that I am not a gentleman. Say goodbye.
Goodbye, Herbert.
You haven't instructed him in the use of one of these machines, have you? HG, it's checkmate, and you've lost again.
A romantic adventure, a breathless chase, around the world, and across a century. Time after time.
You're muted.
Hey everyone, yes, we have H.G. Wells and Jack the Ripper in the same movie, and who better to talk about this with than no one else but Laurie Ulster from TrekMovie.com. Hey Laurie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. That is one hell of a trailer.
Yeah, that was really crazy. But I tell you, I didn't know this movie until you suggested it. And so I am really, just to give everyone a quick log line about it, this movie is about H.G. Wells himself, the creator of the Island of Dr. Moreau, that H.G. Wells, actually building a time machine, and then Jack the Ripper using it to escape the 19th century and come into 1979 San Francisco. And H.G. Wells is on a mad chase after him. That's the story.
And the trailer kind of shows you the entire movie.
It does, but it doesn't. It does, but it doesn't. I mean,
Yeah.
that's all you need to know. It's going after Jack the Ripper. You know, what else you need to know? But what made you what got you into this movie? Because I really had never seen it until you suggested it.
Yeah, I'd heard of it and I hadn't seen it, and I always loved Malcolm McDowell. And then I was listening to a podcast that just ended not that long ago called Hollywood and Levine, which Tony, my All Access Star Trek co-host, had recommended. An industry guy doing these great interviews, and he did a two-parter with Nicholas Meyer. And I was hearing him talk about it was the first movie he directed, and as he talked about it, I was like, I got to see this crazy thing. And when I watched the trailer first, I was like, okay, now this is bonkers. And I had it. And then I watched it and I just loved it. And the more I've watched it, the more things I find in it. It's more layered and nuanced, not nuanced, but it's more layered than you would think from the crazy story.
Now, that's exactly what I thought when I watched it. And in fact, in my notes, I am saying there are 3 levels to watching this film because it's really deep. It's a really smart script. And there's the sci-fi thriller level. We can go there. And then there's this whole political sort of, what sci-fi does best, like putting out their thoughts and what the world should be like, this whole utopian future. I mean, I was fascinated by all of that. That was it all laced throughout the film and was true to H.G. Wells, which I didn't know either until I started researching more, that he really was a proponent of the things that are in this film. So once you see this film, you know H.G. Wells. There's nothing in this film that is incorrect. Yeah, they may play loosey-goosey with the time. You know, some of these ideas that he had were probably formulated in his mind as he was a little older man than he's depicted as being here. But it's all Wells. It's all Wells. And then the last one, it's a romance. And I love a romance. I love a good romance. So
it's also like
too.
A fish out of water comedy.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it's comedy, romance, social commentary, sci-fi, and thriller. It's like all of this great mishmash. And I think that's what makes it so good because it is so rich.
Yes. Yeah. So if you're looking for, a straight through crazy sci-fi thriller, you're not going to get that because it's going to give you some breathing room. And it's going to give you a lot of comedy because Malcolm McDowell is actually pretty funny in this movie. And I think he does a great job playing a man that's out of his time in 1979, which sounds ancient to us now, but he can't even deal with 79. And there's a funny story because you were talking about listening to a podcast, and I was listening to a podcast about the making of Caligula that somebody told us about, and it's a 6-parter. And I'll get the name of it for you a little bit later. But Malcolm McDowell was coming off of making Caligula,
right?
And he took this role because he said he wanted to get away from the sex and violence. I'm like, wait, you went to Jack the Ripper after and that made you feel better than what you were doing in Caligula? You poor baby.
But that made me laugh because it was nice for him to play a good guy, which he liked. But the thing I love about 70s filmmaking and older filmmaking is that you can do Jack the Ripper without showing me a knife ripping someone's skin which frankly I don't want to see. I'm a sensitive girl. And so they showed you got the sense of violence. I mean, it's like The Godfather does the same thing. There's a famous scene where the sister's being beaten up, but you don't see it, you just hear it. And so I really appreciated that I always got the sense of the horror and violence without having to see it in front of my face and without it being glorified.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know they did it for the first murder, the opening. So you got the cold open and you have Jack the Ripper and you don't see him. He's talking to the victim and Jenny or Mary, whatever. I think she was Jenny in the movie, but it was really Mary was the first victim. And then you see the whole thing setting up and you're like, oh girl, don't do it. But that one time they really kind of showed the blood, the body, the horror of the whole thing, because you were setting the stage to identify who this was. But once he did that, once Nicholas Meyer did that, that was it. Until there's another one, and I'm gonna go there because now that you brought this up, I thought it was very interesting because I understand exactly what you said. And then, like, I think Murder Number 2, we don't really see it; we just see it in the newspaper. And then there's Murder Number 3, which is Patty D'Arborville, who's like Don Johnson's first wife. And then
she's great. I mean, I wish they'd given her more to do because she's fun.
I always liked her, and she always got the short end of the stick. Everybody was like Melanie better in that whole divorce and mashup and whatever was happening. And it was just, Patty was crazy back in those days. She just was crazy. But she had a lot of bad publicity, so she didn't get a lot of great parts. But she was good in this. And then she gets killed, but you don't see that. But then there's the next one is the sister, and this just said to me, they didn't show it, they didn't glorify it. They usually just showed the blood splurting. But for some reason, when this body is discovered, we not only see it, but it's being dredged out of the river, and she is hanging from a rope. And I said to myself, why is that the sister? Why are we seeing the sister hanging from a rope? I don't understand. What's going on? You got to, if it's on the screen, you got to do something. You didn't just drag her up on the riverbank. No, you went and got a crane and hung her over the bridge and pulled her up. Like, what? But I'm glad you brought up this whole idea of the other women not really being shown, but this one, she got hung.
Yeah. But, and then the one where you just saw her hand, the severed hand. The cleanly severed hand.
And that, okay, so let's get into all the murders. Okay, that one got me because that meant that Amy, played by Mary Steenburgen, had to see that entire murder. And then that looked like they were fighting. Like, I'm like, okay, even if they, girlfriend Carol walked in there, she was supposed to come to dinner. Mary forgot she was supposed to come to dinner because she's on the valley and whatever. The whole thing was so frustrating. That got me crazy.
Yeah.
But so she gets in there. The friend comes to dinner. Mary has forgotten. Mary Steenburgen has forgotten to tell her friend, don't come to dinner. But she doesn't. Carol walks in and gets the cat, hand cut off, blood on the wall, blood everywhere. It was it's so unbelievable.
We know it's awful because the police threw up. The police officer gets there and is throwing up, which tells you a lot of what you need to know. And then, but you're not hearing terrified screams. Like, we're not having prolonged scenes of women in terror.
No,
which I appreciate. No. I don't want that.
Right. No, there wasn't that. Definitely. But so just to go back a little bit, this story was written by Nicholas Meyer's friend Carl Alexander, and he writes a book about this, and he's got like 55 pages, and he says, "Hey, Nick, can you just read this and give me some feedback about this?" Nicholas Meyer reads it, and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to option this like right off the break, and I'm making this movie." So he takes it and makes it a whole screenplay. Now, I don't know whether the book is substantially different from this film in the screenplay, but I know both are in existence.
Right. So Carl was inspired by the 7% Solution, which was Nick's book. So Nick writes a book that gets published and gets made into a movie and all this. Then Carl gets inspired by that to write this. Nick buys this before it's done. And then I read the book, first of all, so I can answer all those questions of what's there and what isn't. But then also they were writing both at the same time. So Nicholas Meyer's writing the movie, Carl's writing the book, and they're exchanging ideas. So Nicholas Meyer basically said to him, like, whatever you want that works for you. And so there are some things, there are some lines of dialogue that are exactly the same in both. And then there are things that are not there and some things filled out. And like a lot more Jack the Ripper internal thought stuff.
Sure.
In the book.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, because Nicholas Meyer also said, a lot of times when you're doing a film, it's the visuals.
Right.
And so you have to cut out a lot of dialogue, or you have to make the dialogue complementary to the visuals. But what I really love what he said in one interview was that nothing trumps sound.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really deep, because
Well,
the music in this is amazing.
the music is crazy, like super crazy and very charged up. And then also even just the very beginning, like you hear Jack the Ripper's like you hear his footsteps. You know, the prostitute, she comes out of the bar, and the nice barkeep is like, make it home safe or whatever.
Yep.
Like, I'm fine. But then you just hear those footsteps, and it's terrifying.
You're just like, oh, here we go. You know, and it's like you know who it is, like from the very beginning. It's like, it's gotta be Jack the Ripper. Oh no.
Right.
But and that really gets me. That really gets me. Now, okay, you know the story about the casting of David Warner, who we love from Star Trek, you know, Next Gen, playing the Cardassian, I mean, all this other stuff that he's ever done too, Titanic and everything else. But here he is playing Dr. John Leslie, whatever his name is, Stevenson. And, you know, by day he's a doctor. Yeah, Stevenson. He's a friend of H.G. Wells, and he's invited to dinner and have a little roast beef, have some brandy. They're sitting and chatting. They're playing chess. Everything's cool. But he's also this mass murderer. So I thought the opening scene of this film was so cool. So like I said, we have the cold open where there's the murder, and we identify that he is truly Jack the Ripper because he's doing all the stuff. He's got the watch. There's all this craziness. There's blood. Okay. And then he shows up at the house with a little roast beef, you know, with the boys. They're all there, you know, the whole oligarchy, you know, patriarchy. They're all sitting there talking about whatever.
Free love.
Free love. Free love and socialism. Don't get us started on socialism, Wells.
Free love.
Oh my God. It was just like, with their mutton chops and everything else. Like, look, this is the problem. This is the DNA. It starts right here. Wow. So then Wells tells them that he's going on a trip, and he is going to take a trip, but he's not going to leave his laboratory because he's made a time machine. And then he throws the schematic on the table. I'm like, here we go. Yeah, I love it.
And the machine looks crazy. It looks like the Jetsons car.
I thought it. You know what though? I loved it. I loved it. It looked like, you know what it looked like to me? It looked like the flying machines in Dune to me, like that have that kind of B shape, almost like a bird shape. And it was called the Argo, the machine. And it looked like something that could fly, as opposed to the instrument in the Time Machine that we all know, that film, the George Pal version with Rod Taylor, where it looks like a car.
Right.
And so I kind of like the idea of them getting inside of something and closing the door, and then all those wacky keys. I didn't understand what the keys were doing from the very the science wasn't sciencing for me.
You had to operate them in exactly the right way.
And why would you put the key on the outside of the machine?
I was going to say the weirdest design
flaw
flaw ever was there's this, if you don't have this in there, you're going to vaporize. So one, I've made it removable, and two, I've put it on the outside.
But it's right.
But they needed to. That was such a key plot point. So they needed it to be that way, but it just felt like they needed it to, you know, was one of those times that you're like, that
it had jewels
is a weird choice for him.
Yeah, the what was it? The something vaporizer, but you know, it came in
vaporizing equalizer. It was called.
I said, okay. Did H.G. Wells write that, or did Nicholas Meyer write that? Who wrote that line?
Yeah, that I don't know. I don't know who's responsible for the vaporizing equalizer.
I'm blaming Nick. Nick, if you're listening, Mr. Mayor, if you're listening, and I know you are, but we were talking about that score because that scene where we do see the Argo for the first time, when he's gonna get in and travel in it. Well, that's not the first time we see it, but it's I thought it was a beautiful machine. But Miklos Rosa did this score, and just so you know, this is the last score that Miklos Rosa would do at Warner Brothers, and he had been there through it all. He is like Hollywood royalty, 17 Oscar nominations. This is the man that did Ben-Hur. This is the man that did Spellbound. This is the man that did so many other films, and he does this one and nails it. Wins a Saturn Award for his very last film in Hollywood, and I was so happy to hear that, to read that, because I love his music. I love his music.
I mean, it was a little, for me, there were just too many times, I think, where it was telegraphing how you were supposed to feel maybe a little too far in advance, which is just a style, like it was the style at that time to some degree with music also. And then there was definitely a part at the very beginning where it sounded right out of Star Trek, the original series, like a tiny piece of it when he's still with all his old fuddy-duddy friends.
Yeah, right. Was so funny that he put. All right, I got one. Okay, here's my head scratcher. Why didn't anyone in that house realize that Stevenson had jumped in that time machine and took off? If that thing shook the house like that when it came back.
Yeah, or even that he was missing.
Well, I could understand that they were concerned that he was missing, because when the police come busting into like the upper class house, that something's up. And
yeah.
Because Wells just got up in the cop's face as soon as the man walked through. What is this? What are you doing here? It wasn't even like, hello, officer, can I help you? It was just like, whoa, what are you doing here? I was like, uh-oh, here we go. And then he says, we're looking for the Ripper, or whatever he called him. And we traced him here. We're searching all the house. I mean, they did a house to house. They were doing a house to house search because the real Jack the Ripper, to give you some background, the real Jack the Ripper madness, it was only 9 weeks. We are still talking about this guy 100 years later.
That's crazy.
It was 9 weeks. I mean, I'm from Boston, and I lived through the Boston Strangler when I was a little kid. That went on for a freaking year. He killed like 14 people. We were scared to death forever. This was 9 weeks of terror. They were rioting in London because the murders were so heinous and grisly, and they didn't know what was going on. So now this is one of the first ones of its kind like this. I mean,
I think also I read something that said that also at that time, people had become much more literate and were reading the papers a lot more than they had been. It had something to do with the education system. I don't think I'm fabricating this. I'm pretty sure I read it. But so that's why the information sort of spread more too, because more people were.
No, because could read the paper.
Yeah.
And he was, and Ripper was actually giving the paper, he was taunting them. He was sending messages to the paper. So it was on. I mean, this is like, Summer of Sam kind of thing, or, this is craziness going on.
This is Criminal Minds level stuff.
Yeah, he's like, oh, you can come and get me. He's leaving messages on doors. I mean, this guy is bodacious and just slashing people, like flaying skin, just like mailing parts of kidneys to the Scotland Yard. People, Jack the Ripper was not a joke at all. It was it was crazy.
And surgically precise, as someone just said, like 100%.
Right.
Which is why they thought he was maybe a doctor.
Mm-hmm. And so they picked that up in this as well. And I thought a lot, like I said, a lot of what they talked about with H.G. Wells was true about his whole life and history, and almost everything about Jack the Ripper in this was pretty much true, even down to the pocket watch, which was something that didn't really come out until much later, like almost 1909. The pocket watch was something that came out after the one suspect was killed by his wife. The arsenic guy was poisoned by his wife, and then they found out, they said the wife didn't do it, but they thought he was the Ripper, and his diary was found, and he had the watch that had the scratches on it, and it had all the initials of the 5 women who had been killed. And so I think that's why the pocket watch was in this. So I was like, the Jack the Ripper stuff is just fascinating. It's just crazy. Yeah, first
Yeah, I
serial
mean,
killer.
it is, but the juxtaposition of
But
H.G.
why
Wells and
is
Jack the Ripper was like brilliant and perfect.
yeah, especially since they had such opposite outlooks on life, obviously. One is looking for utopia, which was true. He totally was, that was something he
Yeah,
believed in, that within 3 generations of his lifetime, we would be in a social utopia. That is what he was preaching and writing about and was a firm believer in. And I thought it was really interesting to watch this film where you have this one person saying that, and then that incredible line of dialogue that I'm so glad didn't get cut out or changed, where he said, he said, I, I was a freak in
yeah,
the 1990s, but here I'm just an amateur. I
yeah.
was like,
Or an
whoa.
amateur, as he said with his British accent. Yeah, and every
And
discussion
the
they have, like,
violence.
it's
Amateur, yes, amateur.
it's
And
amateur. I mean, first of all, the fact that even when he was saying scary things, Jack the Ripper, he says them in this very measured, British, gentlemanly way. Like when he says, "You were literally the last person I expected to see." He doesn't say it like someone who's surprised. He just says it because that's how he says everything.
right, yeah,
But
uh,
like everything he says is like that.
like,
But
you know, yeah,
I loved the I love that I was going to say Holmes because Sherlock Holmes is sort of part of this too in a different way. But Wells thinks that when we solve the problem of need, we will solve the problem of humans being bad and being unequal, which of course we don't and
you
haven't.
don't, no. And
But
he's,
the fact that he wants to believe in it so badly, he does believe in it. Then he listens to Jack basically saying like, no, I fit in here. This is my place. And he's devastated. And I feel like Malcolm McDowell plays that all the information coming in and how he's dealing with it. He plays it so well. Like
yeah,
he gave so many layers to this character that it wasn't just, oh, this funny inventor guy. Like it was really a deep character exploration and a philosophical exploration
yes.
at the same time.
I thought that part of the film and the script was really, really interesting. And the thing that was more shocking even than the murders was when Wells slapped Jack.
Yes.
I went, what just happened? And then he just says, it's contagious, isn't it? Like, oh, Jesus, this is like, he is just messing with this man. But
he is, because there's a whole point where Wells is like, I would never get a gun. I wouldn't get a weapon. And then when all of a sudden, like his girlfriend is in this danger, he's like, no, it's time. Like it changes him. And then ultimately changes him to the point that he knows he has to go back and make sure that no one gets a hold of his time machine.
done.
Spoiler alert. That's it. You know, it
And
is funny when Wells tries to talk. He says, you have to come back with me and face the consequences. And it's like, why would he agree to that?
Why would I come back?
But again, like your word as a gentleman, all this gentleman business, they really tried to hammer home that he still thought, like, this is a guy who's murdered people. And their first conversation is so civilized in the hotel when he comes to find him in the hotel.
Yeah.
And they have this very civil.
Sit
He's
down.
like, sit on the bed. He pats,
Sit on the bed.
pats the bed. Yeah. Let's just watch some television.
And I'm like, don't sit on the bed. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But, and the thing that really got me is that every time you saw Jack the Ripper or Dr. Stevenson, he was adapting more and more to the times. He was looking more and more like a man of the 70s. And H.G. Wells always kept his original old Victorian look. You know, he never wavered. He didn't try to fit in. He didn't try to cut his hair or trim his mustache or anything like that. And, you know, you could tell that David Warner's character was just sliding right in. He's got the leather vest. And
the
one
hair.
thing I noticed is that every time you saw Wells, he's photographed he had the hair, he cut the mutton chops off. Wells has the light He's in the daylight. He's
Yeah.
outside. They made San Francisco look fantastic. And then every time you see Jack the Ripper, he's enclosed and he's in the dark. It's nighttime, so every time it's like one of them's in the light and one of them's in the dark, and they're just doing their thing, and then until they finally have that crazy car chase, and I was like losing my mind with that. But I just love all the cinematic things that Nicholas Meyer picked to depict these two characters changing or not changing throughout this chase.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of very direct juxtaposition too. Like you have Malcolm McDowell and Mary Steenburgen are having these lovely moments together that's being juxtaposed with David Warner like riding in the cab through the worst part of, the seedy part of town and walking around and hearing, and then the club and the whole thing. And they make a point of going back and forth. And it's interesting because when Wells first gets there, people are mean to him, right? Like people are just like, what are you doing? Get out of my, everybody's rude. Like ruder than I would, but I guess I'm trying to remember, like, were people so rude all the time back then? But what he finds instead is someone takes him. I mean, they fall in love, but like she takes him in and she looks out for him. And so he finds this, he tries the church and that doesn't work, but he finds shelter and he finds a place for himself through on the good side. So, so even though Jack is saying like, it's mine, this is my place, we see that it is also a place for Wells, and it could be like he could have stayed, except he had a responsibility.
Yeah.
But if he didn't,
I've got to write all these books.
Yeah, he's got to write all the fiction, and he's got to take care of stuff, and he's got to get the time machine back. Where nobody at the museum even thought to pull out the removable.
Who knew that the vacillator diode, whatever thing was in there? But what got me, that was one of my favorite lines too. And he came to Amy's apartment and he said, "Where are your books?"
Yeah. We have to talk about Mary for just a minute, because this was
absolutely.
This was her second big move. So she'd done Going South, Jack Nicholson and John Belushi and Christopher Lloyd and all these people.
Wow.
Surprising, which I just watched. And then, but then she was so young and she was so perfect in this. And what I love about her is that she seems like this very soft person on the outside. And so almost frail. And then once she starts talking, you're like, this woman is not frail. This woman has, and one thing that was enhanced in the book was, how her sense of independence and how hard she'd fought for it and how proud she was of having a job, working for a living, making it on her own, which I thought again, I think Nick Meyer did the right amount of what he took and what he didn't, because the things he left out, he should have left out, which were great. But she brings such presence and you just believe her. And the big change I'll say between the book and the movie is that in the book, she's not the aggressor as the way she is in the movie, which I loved. Yeah. I love that she was like, come out to lunch. And then she checks with him. That is what you wanted, right? And she takes the lead. She's like, if you don't take me into your arms, I'm going to scream. I love it.
She seems kind of crazy to me at times. So I was like, this child, I don't know what's going on here, because I'm a child of the 70s. I was around at that time. I graduated from college the year this movie was made. And I wasn't working at the bank yet, but I would soon work at a bank. So I got that whole, the uniform she was wearing, the white blouse with the stars, that whole thing came back like, wow, came right back to me. And I did like that whole idea that she had been married and left her husband because she didn't want to be a housewife. Her career, even working in the foreign exchange at the bank, that was, she had worked hard to get there.
Yeah.
And so I appreciated all of that, but I thought she was just a little ditzy with him. But
so I didn't think she was. I mean, the only, to me, the ditzy part is like inviting some dude you just met to your home, which Patty D'Arbanville also did.
Right. I mean, but that's what used to happen back in this. So this is before
Yeah.
age. This is
It
before
wasn't
all these.
unrealistic.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was not. It was not a free love. Here we go. It was. It was there.
And she
So
spoke her mind, and she noticed things about him that were smart things to notice about him, like realizing he was a scientist, and
mhm.
then and saying, and she would just she just said what she thought, which I just found so refreshing
It just
and
right. She had
different.
no filter. I thought how I kept. It came across to me. The girl has no filter at all. But she
And
just
I came across me as like, I wish I were more like her.
She fell in love with him in a day. I mean, what I was like, are you kidding me? But okay, all right, let's just go with it for the movie. But one thing though, you did see that Mick Jagger had been a possible for playing Jack the Ripper, and Nicholas Meyer said that he met with him, and he was sure that Mick Jagger could have pulled the Jack the Ripper part, no problem, but he didn't think he could have pulled the part of playing Dr. Stevenson, that he would be convincing as the British aristocrat who was a doctor. And that whole beginning sequence where, he was
Yeah.
just one of the boys, that wouldn't have played well with Mick Jagger playing that part. I kind of agree with that, but I don't know, maybe
Yeah,
Nick.
it's funny. I was thinking he'd be actually really interesting. I'd love to see him in that role, but I think you're right. I think he wouldn't have been convincing. It just would have stuck out too much. I mean, sometimes, when you're Mick Jagger, it's hard to not be Mick Jagger.
It's hard. That's a good point. That's what Nicholas was like. Mick Jagger? I don't think so. But yeah, he definitely could have played the Jack the Ripper part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, now I'm like, maybe Sting could have done it. But anyway, David Warner did
Ooh,
a great
I
job.
would have. Yeah. Oh, he was perfect in this. He was absolutely
Yeah.
perfect. Although I have to say, the funniest part for me is watching two British white guys running through the streets of San Francisco. I was like, y'all are some slow ass dudes. I mean, like anybody could have caught these two, but they were running and running, and they looked exhausted. It looked like there were no doubles, and I'm going, okay, somebody put them out of their misery. Just catch
Yeah.
one of you, catch the other, because I can't watch this anymore. But
And they're looking at each other from really far away, and you're like, you could totally run away before he caught up to you.
before he got there, because he was so slow, I
Like
couldn't
way
believe
on
it.
some other bridge somewhere or something else, and it's like, what? I don't understand. I
That
mean,
was the only thing
yeah.
that just was not any thrilling going on in that. I was like, okay, I'll call me when this scene is over, because you two guys are just cracking me up. Oh my God. But now, I thought it was funny too, because Mary Steenburgen plays this woman who is in love with a man from a different time here, and then she's going to have pretty much the same role in the Back to the Future sequels later. She's going to play a woman in the 19th century who falls in love with a time traveler from the 20th century. And there was some talk about they actually cast her because she had done this movie.
Right.
Like, I thought that was cute.
Yeah, I mean, I confess I haven't seen all. After I saw one Back to the Future, I enjoyed it, and I felt
I did see
finished.
two. I did see two. I think she's in three.
I think she's
I,
in 3, that's what I read.
right. And
But I
they,
remember seeing her in Melvin and Howard when it came out, because she won an Oscar for that, and that was probably
mhm.
the first time I saw her in anything. And then I've just seen her in so many things since. But I feel like she brought something to this role. It could have so easily gone wrong and been someone where she was just ditzy or too trusting. And I felt like her personality lent itself to falling in love with him and to all of this making sense.
I thought she was really great when she finally got it that he was telling the truth. When she finally, she'd been hearing about this whole thing, and now she was like, I don't believe you. The whole scene on the they were on the dock or something, and she was like, I'm out of here. I gotta go. You are crazy. And then he takes her in the time machine and shows her what's going to happen, and they find out she's going to be murdered. And now we go into absolute. She's on it.
Well, and she loses her strength, right? Like she collapses almost in his arms because like once she's seen her picture.
For a minute. Yep.
Yeah, she has that
Right.
moment.
For a minute. But then she's like,
More than
we
she
got to
can
go to the
bear.
cops. You
And
got
then
to,
she
this
gets-
guy's
yeah.
crazy. Yeah. She's like, come on, you know, she's changing tires. She's like, get to the phone booth. You know,
And
she's not
changing
playing anymore.
tires.
She's like,
I know. He's like, you change the tire, I'll go find a phone. I'm like, mm-hmm. But he wouldn't know how to
do you
change a
have a
tire.
dime? Do you have a
Yeah.
dime? Read the instructions. I love that scene because she's just like too through with him. Like, figure it
Yeah.
out. You're a scientist.
Yeah, go find a phone. I'm busy. Yeah.
We got to stop a murder. We're trying to stop a murder because the police won't believe you because you told them you were Sherlock Holmes. So,
Right.
oh my God. Oh my God. So I did love that. Okay, now the book and the versus the script. We know Nicholas Meyer loves Sherlock Holmes. He is the author of The 7% Solution, which was on the New York Times best-selling list for 40 weeks.
Yeah.
If you don't know this book, it is a mashup of Sherlock Holmes and Sigmund Freud. And it's a very famous book turned into a movie. And, you know, this actually won, it got Nicholas Meyer an Oscar
right?
nomination,
Yeah.
nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay, which is one of the reasons why he could finagle this deal that if Warner Brothers wanted this script for Time After Time, they had to take him as the director. So that had a lot to do with why he got that deal done. So here he is making this movie about this. And I was wondering if the Sherlock Holmes piece was something he added, or was that in the original book?
Oh, the references were in the book. Yeah. But if you think about it, his friend was inspired by his book about Sherlock Holmes. So it makes sense that he would.
Oh, that's the book that he
put
was
it in
inspired by, The 7% Solution.
Well, he was inspired by the 7% solution. He said,
Yeah.
your book inspired me. Will you take a look at what I'm doing? So I love that. Like, they knew each other. So it's an interesting.
Got it.
I love the creativity of that
Yeah, they were
collaboration.
real buddies.
that
Yeah.
They were spending more time thinking about story than hammering out deals, which I appreciated. You can't even do that anymore. Like, I don't know how
And
you would even do that anymore.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think those three characters, you know, and sometimes, you know, you almost forget that Jack the Ripper was a real person. He's in so many books and movies and references that you almost think that he's even in Star Trek, you know, Open the Fold. We mentioned Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's like you almost think that he's a fake person, but he was a real person. We don't know who he was. To this day, we don't know who really Jack the Ripper was.
Well, because he's spinning in infinity. He's lost in the time vortex.
He
without
pulled
the vaporizer.
He pulled the vaporizer. That's why we don't know where he is.
Now he's out of luck. There is that weird, you know, in the moment when he does it, I was trying to figure out what's going on in that final look, because he's on the inside and he sees Wells, and his eyes are telling me, like, he's acknowledging he sees it. So, and he almost nods at him.
Yeah,
like,
he does. He's like, do it.
Right?
Do it.
Yeah. And maybe he wants to be free himself from this.
He's tired of being chased too. I mean,
yeah.
You know, there was definitely some craziness to him. Obviously, the man was crazy. But there was, I don't know if there was remorse. I mean, no, I
think it was more exhaustion than remorse.
That's a good point. Yeah, that might have been it, because it's just to feed the beast that was within him. I mean, you know, that just seems like something that, I mean, if this is what you have to do to be happy or to be satisfied or to release whatever demon that you are doing this to people, and you got to hide from the police and you're hiding from everybody, basically, you can't come out of the darkness. You know, you can't have any kind of life. And he did have some kind of life when he was in London, but now here he is in America, and you know, and he's like just running around. I don't know. But to get back to H.G. Wells, I just wanted everybody to make sure you knew exactly who this guy was, but a little bit. He's more famous for his early sci-fi novels, and less famous, I think, to us for his later political views or social views and his stances on free love and things like that came later. He did live up until the Second World War, which he mentions in the movie. So he definitely broached both the 19th and the 20th century. But he is the writer of The Time Machine, The Invisible Man, The Island of Dr. Moreau, War of the Worlds, The First Men in the Moon, and another one called Things to Come, which is that's the name of the movie, but the book was called the movie is called Things to Come, and it was made by the British. The other films were all made in America. But and they also say that the War of the Worlds gave pop culture the image of Martians that survive today. I mean, this man just laid the groundwork for so much science fiction that it is amazing. Even though later on he wrote a lot of social comedies. You know, he's from a poor family. He did a lot of kind of like EastEnder kind of stuff, and he was a real good observer of that lower middle class life, and he made some great works about that. And they also said that he could have been a second Dickens. He was so good with that. So, but we know him as a sci-fi writer, and we know mostly because of his film, the films that were made of his books. I don't know how many people have actually read all these books. I've read 2 of them.
Right.
I read The Time Machine, and I know I've read War of the Worlds, but I have not read all the rest of them. I've only seen the films. So, and I've seen both Time Machines. I like the first one better. Now, and I also like the fact that this movie starts off exactly like the film, The Time Machine, with that dinner at the house.
In the book, they're having dinner and that discussion until 5 a.m.
Yeah,
like,
oh, wow.
He is telling them about the time machine, and he's waiting hours and hours and hours for all this other stuff to go on. So good choice, Nicholas Meyer.
Yeah, I loved it, because as soon as I saw the whole setup, I'm like, oh, he's doing exactly what was done in The Time Machine, and then he's gonna disappear. But I love that Stevenson got in there first. That just was a flip. That was
smart.
Such a flip. Yeah. And took off. But like I said, I don't know how nobody knew that he was in that thing, because the thing shook the house to pieces. But no, the only thing that I love the music that they did for that. But I just wanted to tell you, like 1979, this film had a great response. You know, people did go to see it. It made $13 million. It was a moneymaker, but it was a smaller film. This is the same year. It was Aliens also came out this year. Star Trek: The Motion Picture came out this year. Mad Max came out this year. And even Sean Connery and Carl Malden made a sci-fi movie called Meteor this year. So everybody was trying to catch Star Wars and throw a sci-fi movie up on the wall and see if it would stick. So Nicholas Meyer got the go to make this movie, and they were like, "Oh, is it sci-fi? Yeah, make it." So, but I love that it is such a smart script. I mean, if you take the time, watch the film. And you can watch it on that one level like we were talking about. But if you want to go down into the layers of who Jack the Ripper was and who H.G. Wells was and what was going on with women's liberation at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And even the Duck Out of Water, comedy of it, I thought it was just really a great, great script. And I thought it was really smart.
I love that the fish out of water scenes weren't just there for comedy. Like, I felt like the McDonald's scene, which you could see as it's obviously being played for comedy, but it's also so revealing of character, because we see him standing in line and he's trying to figure out what the hell this place is.
Yeah.
He listens to the guy in front of him and repeats the order, becomes himself again when he realizes he wants tea. I wouldn't recommend the tea at McDonald's. So, and he's so fast, like he is being a scientist 100% and adjusting. It's like this whole thing of him, okay, I have to figure out how to live in this world, so I'm going to copy, like he does with the cab, right? He's like, I'm smart enough, and that we don't have to talk about it, because again, a different sort of era of storytelling, which is that we can just see him do it, and we don't need someone to point, look what he's doing.
Right.
So he is
even that when he was just looking at the plastic table in McDonald's. That was my favorite part. He was like,
Yeah.
I've never seen wood like
I've never
this.
seen. I like when he's following the woman in the transparent
Plastic
pants,
pants.
and he's taking notes. He's walking around taking notes, and when he's watching her drive before he even asks her questions, like you can see him doing this. He's always figuring out, how does this work? How do
How
I
does this
fit
work?
in? What should I say so that I don't sound so weird? Like trying to figure it out. So, and that's what she picks up on too. Like she notices that about him.
Yeah, she notices that he's always observing and that he's just like, even when he was eating the food, he was like checking it out. He's looking underneath.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was he was eating, but he's just going for it. Like, what is this?
Of course, she
So-
didn't see him drop a spoon into her incinerator.
Just,
and then he puts
would
it in
check
his
out
pocket.
he was checking. I know he's checking out the microwave, the telephone. Like,
Yeah.
what is this? I mean, there was so many things that if you are thinking about it, there was just so many. I mean, even when he was in his home, the one comment when they went down, all of them, when they all went down into the basement, he said electric lights. Like he had electricity in his home, and the others did not. I mean, he was H.G. Wells.
Yes, exactly.
And he was such a scientist, and he was a scientist in real life. He had been trained as a biologist.
Yep.
And so I love the fact that he was, the depiction was really true to the real man. I felt like you could just watch this movie and get a really good sense of who the true H.G. Wells really was.
Which I think it was very strongly in the writing, and it was very strongly in the portrayal. Like Malcolm McDowell is so great. And he did such a good job of constantly, like a very strong inner life the whole time.
Yeah.
And it's easy when you're playing a famous person. It's easy to maybe play them as less dimensional, less multidimensional, and less real. And I think he played them very much. Both of them played them very much like human beings, complicated human beings.
Yes, because it could have been really easy to go way far wrong with Jack the Ripper.
Oh, yeah.
Because you actually, he was, I don't want to say he was likable, but, he wasn't, as Wells said to him, he said, we were friends at one time.
Yeah.
We were friends. He was just like, could not believe that this was somebody that he was friends with. Like, I can't believe that this is the guy that's ripping women apart. And now I've got to chase you. You're making me chase you.
Right.
What's going on here?
And that theme had been there from the beginning when you see them playing chess, where Stevenson is like, yeah, until you understand me the way I understand you, you're not gonna beat me. And I felt like all of those things just kept coming back and reinforcing this theme of these two people. I mean, look, we see it in Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, right? We see the same. It's really about these two people.
It's about these two people going at each other, and like everything else is going around them, but these two people are going at each other, and they have something personal. And now, even that last scene where he says, does she really mean that much to you? And personally, I don't find her very attractive. That whole conversation between the two of them was like, oh man, these two are just going there with this. I was like, he gets on his knees and begs for her life.
Yes, he's crying, begging for her life.
Begging for him not to kill this woman, please, just not this woman. And he said, you have thousands of years or thousands of women that you've got the machine, like go and kill somebody else, but not this woman. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
That took me out. But anyway, all right. But now, okay, the end of the movie. Here we go. The end of the movie. Would you have gotten in that time machine and gone back to the 19th century with your H.G. Wells?
No. I can't give up my modern conveniences. Like to be a woman then was ridiculous.
And she was like, oh, I'm going to change my name to Susan B. Anthony. I'm like, no, you're not, girl. It's going to be a world of hurt when you get back there and find out what your position is now going to be as Mrs. Wells.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Like I love big romantic gestures, but I'm like, there's a point at which, like, it's unless you're a white man. I mean, did you ever watch the show Timeless?
Yep.
You
Oh,
fin-
all the time. Oh, that was my show.
I was obsessed with that show,
I was
and
too.
I loved that, like, the one white guy always was fine wherever they went,
Yeah.
and the white woman and
He
the
could
black
pass for
man.
everything. They always had to like.
There's a great line, right, where he goes, "There is nowhere that is safe for me."
Yeah,
Like,
the black guy. There is no time I want to go back
yes,
to it. Nothing.
yeah,
No.
like, forget it. And so, like, she has moments where it's better for her and whatever, but he's always like screwed every single time. And
Right.
so
Right.
so that's going back into the past would be very problematic.
But yeah, they always have some scene like that. Even there's a movie with Hugh Jackman and Meg Ryan, and she jumps back in time with him. And I'm like, you know what? I would not be the one. I would be like, honey, it's been real,
Yeah.
but see you later. Keep
Or stay
your
with
vassal
me.
later.
Everything's
Yeah, you
gonna
can
be
stay
great.
here.
Yeah.
I think she asked him to stay there, but yeah, he said he had to get back. But
Right.
no, I wouldn't have done it either. I wouldn't have done it. But anyway, so, but in real life, Mr. Wells did run off with an Amy Robinson. She was a former student, and his marriage, like he says in the film, went by the wayside, and he was divorced and everything. And he runs off with this woman named Amy Robinson, like in the film. So that really did happen. He absconded with her and later married her. And the son
But
that he
then I
ends up,
think had a bunch of affairs and stuff.
well,
right?
there's that. That wasn't in the Wikipedia section that I read, but
Yeah, I think he was, Mr. Free Love. I think he was having
yeah.
some free
Oh
love.
boy, he told you right off the bat. He told you when they tell you who they are.
Yeah,
Believe them. You got to jump in the time machine with the fool. Okay, whatever, Mary. Anyway. But that's our film tonight, and it was a doozy. Thank you very much for introducing me to this, because I am a fan of H.G. Wells, and I really enjoyed this deep dive into his life that it made me do. There was a lot that I didn't know about him, and then when I read about it and then watched the film again, I realized that Nicholas Meyer and Carl Alexander, they nailed it. And I really appreciate that, because there aren't a lot of films that are about sci-fi writers, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, and about what sci-fi is really about for me, which is social issues.
Mm-hmm.
It's about, you use the wacky story to say something that might be harder to say. And I think that's when sci-fi is at its best.
Yeah, and they definitely did that here, talking about violence and utopia and women's rights and free love. It was all in there, and I really enjoyed the whole dynamic of the two of them talking about whether man would ever evolve into a better creature, which was another thing that Wells was really, he was a real proponent of the fact that he thought humans would evolve. But, as Jack the Ripper says to him, we haven't changed in 2,000 years. Why do you think we'll change in 3 generations?
It's such a great, it's the heart of what Star Trek is all about, which is that question. But it also reminds me, I had a team teachers of history for 1 year in high school. These 2 guys who were except one wasn't a murderer, but they had opposite views on society. So I had one who said, we created society to protect ourselves from each other because we're all terrible. And the other one said, we created society because we unite to go for a better future. And they were always having these debates. So I was like, oh, it's so interesting. It's like the same debate.
Yep, it is. Anyway, all right. So any closing words or facts about our film that you'd like to leave with our audience? It seems to be
I have a fun fact.
Yes?
I do have a fun fact, which is that the punk on the bus in Star Trek 4 was a scene that was originally, he came up with this scene with the music playing for this movie, and it was cut. But it was this guy in the street, I think, with a boombox, and then they had a joke about it that paid off later. So they cut it, and then they saved it, and he threw the joke into Star Trek 4.
Oh, that's a good one. I love stuff like that. All right. So as you know, that's it for film. And what we're going to do now is our little 6 degrees to Star Trek. And I'm going to have Yvette Hey, Bet. It's time again for 6 Degrees of Star Trek. Having some Wi-Fi issues here.
She says, just did it.
Got double 6 degrees because I didn't see it. Okay, so here we go. And now this movie has so many Star Trek people in it that it is ridiculous. But you know me, I'm going around the barn and we're going to come out in 6 degrees in a way that only CinneCine can do. So we're going to start in the first position with Mary Steenburgen, who plays Amy in this film. And Mary, going into the second position, made a great film called Zoe's Extraordinary Christmas. And you know, if I can get a Christmas movie mentioned in 6 Degrees to Star Trek, I'm going to do it. Now, this is one of the best Christmas movies I have ever seen. You will thank me if you will go and watch this. It was nominated for 2 primetime Emmys. I'm not talking about daytime Emmys or some wild, stuff that like only Hallmark movies get. No, I'm talking about the real primetime Emmys. It was nominated for Best Movie, and it was also nominated for Best Choreography. So in the second position, we have Zoe's Extraordinary Christmas, starring Mary Steenburgen. Now, in that movie stars David St. Louis. David St. Louis is a hunk of burning love. This is a tall glass of water. Oh my God, this brother is so handsome. He plays Perry, who is the boyfriend of a gender fluid Mo. So, this is the DEI 6 Degrees of Star Trek. We're putting everybody in this, okay? So Mo's pronouns are she, her, but then when he feels like it, it's him, he, him, and sometimes it's they, them. I love the character of Mo, and this guy, David St. Louis, plays the boyfriend of Mo. So if you haven't seen this Christmas movie, you don't know what you're missing, right, Laurie?
The whole show. I was obsessed.
The whole show. So check that one out. But now we go from David St. Louis in the third position over to the fourth position, Queen Latifah in The Equalizer. David St. Louis is also in The Equalizer now. Yes. So loves Queen Latifah and loved the original Equalizer, which is back with the Scottish guy, like before Denzel did it. I always like the old one, the old TV series, but I've liked every iteration of The Equalizer. Good show. And so from The Equalizer, we now go to the fifth position to Louise Toussaint. Louise Toussaint is also in The Equalizer. You will also know her if you listen to another podcast I did about the movie Fast Color. Louise Toussaint is in that. She's also in a film called The Runner. She starred in Friday Night Lights. She was in Blackish. She was in Selma. I mean, what do you need to know? She was also in Orange is the New Black. And I bet you think you know where I'm going. But no, I'm not going there. We're going to the sixth position. We are going to Being Mary Jane because we want to go to Gabrielle Union, who starred in Deep Space Nine, Sons and Daughters, playing the Klingon weapons officer Nagarin, and she was the bully of Alexander. And she said in her biography, even as a Klingon, I'm on the Mean Girl squad. And that's our 6 degrees tonight. Sons and Daughters, Gabrielle Union. Yay, Gabrielle was a Klingon. I love it when you can get from Mary Steenburgen to Gabrielle Union. I love it.
I love that you didn't go for the obvious. That was great.
Never. I know it. I was like, I could go to like Jane, but no, I'm not doing that. Plus, I wanted to tell you about Zoe's Extraordinary Christmas, the movie.
Do you know the crazy thing about Mary Steenburgen and music?
What's that?
Which is that she had some surgery for something, came out of anesthesia, and this was like in the 2006, I don't know, I might have the year wrong. Anyway, after that, she could only think in music. And it was bothering her because everywhere she went, she was hearing music, seeing music, thinking music, feeling music. So she finally decided, she got some musician friends and she started writing these songs and she sent them in. under a different name and got a deal to write
Oh
songs.
my God.
And I think she's Grammy nominated now as
Oh,
a
wow.
songwriter. But so whenever I watched her on Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist and she's singing and whatever, and then I was remembering, oh yeah, she had that weird music thing that happened in her head. So crazy.
Never knew that. She was Zoe. She was living Zoe's life.
Yeah, yeah. Isn't that funny? Like she actually, she had it happening.
Well, check it out, you guys, because I saw that Christmas movie a couple of years ago, and I thought it was the most amazing Christmas movie I ever saw. It's got everything in it. So that is our 6 Degrees of Star Trek. So please stay tuned for our next live show, is Khan the Musical next Tuesday. And thank you, everybody, for being part of this amazing community. If you're new, make sure to subscribe, like, and ring the bell so you don't miss our great guests in sci-fi movies. If you want to get your brand in front of our passionate movie-savvy audience, sponsor CinneCine Goes SyFy. It's a unique chance to connect with loyal consumers who love science fiction and insider insights from directors, screenwriters, and fans. Whether you're a small business or an individual, it's a great way to reach out to an engaged community. Click the link in the show descriptions or visit sci-fi-sisters.com/sponsors to learn more. Laurie, thank you so much for talking about this cool ass film with me. I mean, I really just enjoyed it on so many levels.
That was so fun. Thank you so much.
All right, everybody, that's our show. Good night.